Tonight's topic is A Grace Given, Part 2.
Good evening. Tonight we're going to air the second part of an interview by AFA's Frank Schroeder, of the author of a new book titled A Grace Given, along with his wife Liz Gilgis. Liz is the oldest of my 7 children, and Ellie, who died at age 10, was the oldest of my 24 grandchildren. Now the interview.
Hello, and thanks for joining us. My name is Frank Schroeder, and you've tuned in to the American Family Association Presents. This is part 2 of our program. In part 1, we met Kent Gilgis, the author of this new fascinating book called A Grace Given, the story of Ellie Gilgis. I'm pleased to invite into the studio part 2 and the better half, bringing in Liz Gilgis along with Kent to discuss this terrific story a little bit further. Welcome, and how are you?
Fine, thank you.
Good to see you. We spoke on our last program about your daughter, Ellie, who was born and diagnosed after 7 months with a inoperable brain tumor and ultimately had brain surgery, and Ellie lived for another 10 years. Quite a hardship by most people's standards, but we'd like to talk to you a little bit about it. Tell us just a little bit about your family, Liz.
Well, Ellie was the oldest child, and we always liked to keep her included in our family. I never wanted her to be off in a different room or inaccessible. I wanted the kids to grow up knowing her, and so her room was the playroom, and we had nurses. It was a revolving door. Nurses would just be coming and going, and we bought the house because I think I was 8 months pregnant at the time.
How many kids do you have?
6.
Okay.
Ellie's the oldest. But I was 8 months pregnant at the time, and I just walked in and I saw the place for Ellie, and I said, this is the house.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. How did the two of you meet?
We met at Cornell my freshman year, and he was a couple of years older.
Okay.
So.
And you wind up studying in Europe for a period of time.
Yes. He went to Oxford, and I was nannying over there and doing pottery and dancing and painting and having a great time.
Very good. Tell us a little bit about your daughter's first months.
I was so excited to have her. I remember in the beginning I had some complications when I just found out I was pregnant, and they thought I was going to miscarry. And I was thinking to myself, I want this baby. I have a diary, and I said, I want this baby no matter what. I don't care if something's wrong. I want this baby. Okay. So I was very excited. All I wanted to be was a young mother.
You, the two of you come from a little bit different religious experiences. First of all, how about you? Liz, what's your background?
I'm the 7 children. I grew up in a very Catholic family. We practiced our faith. It was a very important part of my life. And when I met Kent, that was one of the stumbling blocks, is that he came from a totally different family. Religion was not a normal part of their life. And so I just thought, how are we going to reconcile this?
And that was certainly a topic of conversation and prayer.
Yes.
There comes a point where you pray for Kent. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, I was pregnant with Ellie, and I was about 6 months pregnant, and I was going back to school for a nursing degree, and I would have to drive an hour each way, and we bought this very inexpensive car, and we had them take out the radio. We couldn't afford the radio. So I would have an hour to drive each way, and so I would pray the rosary every time, and I remember praying for Kent to become a Catholic or believe in God, and at that point, I had really never known anything bad in my life. School was easy for me. I had a lot of friends. I had a great family. I had never known anyone who died. And so the worst thing that I could think of...
Well, what did you, when you're saying a prayer now?
Yes, I'm praying the rosary, and I'm offering it up for Kent, and I kind of said to God in my mind, you know, I'll accept any suffering you give me if Kent will believe in you, if you change his heart. And the worst thing that I could think of was if I became obese and had acne. And I know that sounds absolutely ludicrous now.
And I'm also, just for the record, I'm glad to see that that hasn't happened.
But that was the worst thing that I could possibly imagine happening. I did not really know.
Your perspective was about to change,
Right? Yes.
Kent, you give a beautiful rendition of some of what we're talking about, some of your own thoughts and struggles in this area, and you describe it very well. Could you read that passage for us?
Sure, I'd be glad to. One winter evening in March 1994, I sat in a rocking chair staring out the window of our living room. The night was black, there was no moon, but the sky was full of stars. I could just discern the lower limbs of the spruce tree outside the window. Liz was putting Ellie, nearly 7 months old, to bed, and I had been thinking all evening about religion and Catholicism. It struck me how important it was to Liz. Perhaps I should be more open to the possibility of religious feeling in spite of my lack of inclination. I decided to leave it up to God, so I sat in the chair and prayed, God, if it's your will that I become a Catholic, if Christ has some relevance to me, and if religion is something that I should embrace, give me some kind of a sign. I stood and moved to the window, half expecting a shooting star or some other dramatic event. I watched intently. The night was as black and quiet as any. Snow blew lazily over the drift just outside the window. There was no special sound, no unexpected movement. Nothing happened. Soon Liz called from the back and broke my reverie. She needed a clean diaper. Could I help? I smiled at my moment's fancy and dropped back into my life as it was. How silly I was being, I thought. Soon I forgot my request of God amidst the more mundane clutter of daily life. Changing diapers, work, writing articles in the evening, fixing the house. It was easy to forget my prayer when nothing happened. 1 month later, we found out Ellie would die from a brain tumor.
Giving new meaning to the word wake-up call.
Yeah.
So both your worlds are sort of challenged, coming from different perspectives. We know from the story that Ellie winds up having brain surgery and ultimately suffers a stroke, and as a result, for descriptive purposes, is deemed to be in a persistent vegetative state. Describe that for me, Liz. What is that? What was that like as a mother?
Looking back at it now, at videos, I don't know how we did it. And Ken said, just the other day, I said, I don't know how we did it. It was very painful watching these videos of this time.
What was it like at the time, the first time that you now see your daughter after the surgery?
Oh.
What does she look like?
She's laying on a bed of ice. Her body was bluish white.
She's about 8 months old?
She's 8 months old. She just has a diaper on and a white turban on her head. She has chest tubes coming out of her brain, cut downs on her ankles and wrists, and she looked barely alive when we walked into the recovery room. And all of a sudden, I felt terrible that we had done that to her. And then all of a sudden, things started to not go right. And we were quickly ushered out. And all the doctors, the alarms started going off, and all the doctors went around.
Did you feel that way? Did you feel, you say you feel bad that you had done that to her? I guess there has to be a side of it. I'm sure in retrospect that's not the case.
No, in retrospect, I know we made the right decision. Yeah. I know we did what we had to do.
But at the time...
Well, at the time, just seeing her suffering so, it was very hard to see her like that.
You're raised in a Catholic household, Catholic. You know that your faith is strong. Does your faith get rocked at that point? What I mean is, how does a merciful God allow that to happen?
No, all along I kept saying to myself, it's like I went back to my very most primitive thoughts, and I kept telling myself, God is good. That's the only prayer I think I prayed for a very long time, telling myself over and over again that God is good. So I didn't doubt him, and did not ask why. I loved Ellie, and we were just dealing with this.
How about you, Kent? How does that, when you now see there's a reality to your daughter's condition as well. Did that make you question whether there was a God?
No, I don't think either of us ever sort of got to that point. I think, you know, number one, the whole time you're sort of dealing with a series of immediate decisions that you have to make, and just trying to deal with that is more than you can think. It's really in sort of reflective times afterwards when you ask questions like that. And I don't think Liz or I ever sort of question God. I think more we sort of question, well, what do we do about it? You know, how do we live with this? How do we live with losing a child? How do we live with when we thought we now might not lose her, but that we could live with her for 30 years? At one point, a doctor told us she might live, but would be completely dependent on us and would never, in some ways, sort of know us or react to us.
After the surgery, Ellie lives for 10 years.
She did.
The days of the surgery and the weeks following, you have a chapter in your book entitled 9 West. I imagine when you get married and you fall in love and you're doing your dreams, you're not anticipating spending time on a pediatric oncology unit at a hospital in Manhattan. You had different experiences there. When you're spending time there, first of all, you're now around lots of very sick children. What was that like for you? How did you cope with it?
Well, for me, 9 West was the floor and the wing that we were on at New York University, and it's the floor where the kids with cancer are, and particularly with brain tumors or brain problems. And so you have families that are dealing with, you know, I think one of the worst things that a family could have to deal with, and it's like a bit of a war zone. You have kids walking around or in chairs being pushed around by their parents, and they have helmets on because part of their brain has been removed, or they have brain tumors. And so you see a lot of suffering. And you know, what was amazing to me is Liz and I, maybe it was ignorance and maybe it was partly grace, but we maintained a sort of happiness, and we had a lot of hope at that point because the doctors had told us the surgery was a success. We didn't realize she had a stroke until later.
I see.
And so we thought everything's going to be good.
What was your time like at 9 West? Kent, you kind of described sometimes you'd have to kind of get out of there and clear your head. You kind of stayed more immersed.
Yes, I couldn't understand him at the time, why he wanted to go out and get fresh air when Ellie was so fragile, lying in this bed.
Just from a guy's perspective, I can understand it.
Yes, no, and I understand it now.
But I'm curious to hear how you didn't need that.
No.
What did you do?
I never left. I never left except for one night. It was our anniversary, and my mom and my sister came in and we went out for 2 hours.
But when you were there, what are you doing? You're with Ellie.
I'm with Ellie.
And not just with Ellie.
No, there were so many other sick children there, and all these sick people, a lot of suffering, and I just think if you could everyone should spend a week in a hospital. It changes your life. But each case seemed to be worse than ours, and at least we had each other, and we were going to love Ellie, and that was the most important thing to me at that point. But there were so many. I was going around talking to all the different moms and dads, and I still keep in touch with one now. She still calls me every year on Ellie's birthday.
Wonderful. You've tuned into the American Family Association Presents. We're talking with Kent and Liz Gilgis about their daughter Ellie, who died at age 10 with complications from a brain tumor. There's a certain reality after the surgery. Ellie is blind, is being fed through a stomach pump.
A feeding tube.
Never walks, never talks again, needs constant care. Tell us about the reality of that. What was your day like? What did it...
Ellie had to be held most of the time because she would vomit out of the blue many, many times a day, and she could aspirate and get pneumonia or choke to death if she wasn't flipped over. So I couldn't take a shower while she was lying like this. I had to hold her all the time. So we had nurses around the clock helping us.
Ultimately.
Ultimately. In the
initially.
beginning we didn't. For the first several months we had no idea.
Exhaustion, is that fair to say?
Yes, exhaustion.
Emotional, physical?
Yes, I mean, it's funny, I forget about it now.
I guess you go into survival mode.
Yes.
I would, otherwise, like you say, you look back, you say, how did I do it? So that's, you slowly, reality starts creeping in. You have a job, you're home, the child is here in New York, your home is where?
Yeah, well, Liz and Ellie couldn't leave New York, but I had to...
Where were you living at the time?
We were living in as far north in Michigan as you can go,
Okay.
which is 20 hours from here driving.
You ultimately returned to Michigan.
I had to keep up our health benefits.
And you're now separated
Right.
during this period. What was that like?
It was a very difficult thing because I was up there and I didn't know if I'd ever see my daughter again. You know, we could lose her at any moment. And so I would call home at night. I called back here at night, and I would hear Liz and all of her sisters and brothers, and there was a lot of laughing and talking. And I could hear, you know, all of them talking to Ellie, but I couldn't be a part of it. And so
Very isolated time.
it was a very difficult thing. And I was in the middle of fixing a house that needed a lot of work. And all the time I was asking myself, why am I fixing this? I may never even be able to bring my family back here.
It's a isolated time for you, an exhausting time for you. Can you describe a day in the life for Ellie, what Ellie might be experiencing as you believe it to be? I'd like you to read a quote for us from your book, if you would. And this is Ellie speaking.
Well, let me just give a little bit of background on this.
Please.
You know, a lot of times, one of the most difficult things for me, I think, when I reflected on Ellie, is that she couldn't talk to us, and so we didn't know what she might be thinking, whether she was in pain, whether she was suffering. There was no way for her to express that to us. And a lot of times, some of the most difficult things for me were imagining what she might be thinking. And so one of the chapters in the book, I put myself in her shoes and tried to describe it. Tonight, Cheryl didn't make me do exercises. Instead, Mommy took me in the bath with her. I love the bath. Mommy and I get in together, and it's always very hot. You might wonder what I think about when I'm floating in the bathtub with my eyes closed. That's the best part of the story. I think about God. I try to imagine what it will be like when God holds me. You see, since my eyes don't work like everyone else's, I see different things than most kids. Mommy and Daddy think that when I tilt my head back and look at the ceiling, it has something to do with my brain not working. It doesn't, though. Up high above us, I see angels dancing. Sometimes they come down close and talk to me, and sometimes they're very far away, but they always seem to be dancing. And when they talk to me, they tell me that God is waiting for a little while yet to see me, and that I have a very good reason for being here. They say that when I visit God, I will sit on his lap and talk to him for a long time. And when I fall asleep, he's going to give me to the angels to hold while they wait for Mommy and Daddy.
Thank you. I urge our viewers to get a hold of this book. You don't need to have a sick child to learn some of the lessons of struggle and faith. And we're going to put some more information about A Grace Given. You now, in dealing with the reality, so to speak, of Ellie, you have round-the-clock nurses, pretty much.
Yes.
Ultimately, your faith and your questions lead you to Lourdes. Tell us a little bit about that trip.
I had been to Lourdes as a volunteer working in the baths.
Where is Lourdes?
In France, in southern France, in the middle of the mountains.
And what's the significance of it for those who don't know?
For those who don't know, it's where Mary appeared to Saint Bernadette, a little poor girl, And Mary told her to dig, and there came a spring, and these waters have, people have gone to bathe in them for healing. Spiritual healing, physical healing. People's crutches are left there for about 150 years. I think this happened about 1850s or so.
Okay.
So I went to volunteer there for a week, and I loved it. And never in a million years did I think I'd be going back as a pilgrim. But we went back, we took Ellie. It was quite kind of a nightmare in getting there.
How old is Ellie?
It's right after her surgery. We were going to do it right before her surgery, and the doctor said, you know, I want you to go to Lourdes, but we have to do this right away. So we went to Lourdes, and I didn't want to leave.
Ellie's a year, a little more than a year?
It was July.
Okay.
She was almost a year.
Okay.
Almost a year, about 9 or 10 months.
10 months old.
10 months old. We took all the feeding equipment and medicine and formula, and then we got there and the feeding pump didn't work. We didn't have a converter. So it was a little bit grueling in how we had to take care of her, but it was a very peaceful. I thought I would be going there to pray for a miracle, and I looked around at so many people who are worse than us. I can remember 2, and I don't think I prayed for a miracle there. I didn't pray for Ellie.
How about you? What was your experience like at Lourdes?
You
actually, if I remember, you took the plunge.
I took Ellie in the bath when I went to the baths, and I definitely hoped that we would see a miracle for Ellie. What's amazing about Lourdes is it's just an incredibly peaceful place, and you would expect chaos. There are thousands of people come from all over the world, sick, in wheelchairs, with nurses, nuns, priests, all speaking different languages, and yet it's the most ordered, peaceful place I've ever been. Just an incredible place. And thankfully we had Liz's mom with us, or I don't think we could have done it, because somebody had to be up every minute. We had to give her 1 cc of food, and we did it by hand. And so having Liz's mom there allowed us to make it through that trip.
This must be part of the looking back, saying, how did we do this?
It's ignorance is bliss. That's how we made it through.
Continuing your pilgrimage after Lourdes, there came an opportunity for you to go over to Rome. And on your way over there, it was your hope that you might be able to see Pope John Paul II. Tell us how that unfolds.
I thought I could have a private audience with him. I knew nothing. I really knew nothing. So I kept writing letters to the Secretary of the Vatican, first with the bishop. This is all detailed in the book. And every letter kept coming back saying, I'm sorry, but the Holy Father's too busy and too sick at this time to meet with you. Why don't you write to so-and-so? So I kept doing it by hand, putting in a photo of Ellie.
I'm feeling senses of your father coming in here. Not taking that original no.
Right.
Go ahead.
And eventually when we got there, we received a letter one day saying, be at the bronze doors at 7 a.m. And I said, I think we're going to meet the Pope. And I didn't have anything to wear that was appropriate because I didn't think we were going to get to meet him. And my friend, we were staying with my friend Kazina, who's the princess, and her mother dropped a Pope box out the window into the courtyard so I could don myself in black and appropriate attire, and we got to meet him. And I wanted to ask him to pray for Ellie, but I couldn't speak. I just choked up and I couldn't speak.
But you actually meant, first of all, you were at Mass with?
We were at Mass
private Mass with?
Private Mass with the Pope. And then after in a receiving line in his library, and he touched my cheek, and he said, what's the matter? And Kent told him our daughter had a brain tumor. And he looked up at me, and he was only about the same size as me because he was hunched over and small, and he had very clear blue eyes. And I feel he understood a mother's pain, that I did not have to say anything. And he says, you need to pray together. And that was it.
How was your experience there? You had some more practicalities in your mind.
Well, it was nerve-wracking when we thought that we might actually meet John Paul, because I really thought that the Pope is the holiest man on earth. He's just an incredibly holy person, and I thought, Whenever I thought about Ellie, I always go back to the part in the Bible about Jairus and where Jesus raises the daughter, and I'd hoped that I could ask the Pope to give us a miracle, and I, when the time came, I wasn't able to.
I just, you write beautifully about the process of suffering and where it may fit into our cosmos, and I just want to read a little bit from your book, and I'm going to ask you to read following me. You say, we each walk our own paths as individuals. Those paths cross numerous others. We are shaped by the crossings, but we choose our own path. We live our own lives. We endure our own sufferings. God cares for those individual paths. The purpose of each individual life, as best as I can surmise, is to regain paradise, each as individuals. If sacrifice is involved to help others on the same journey, it is an individual's choice. It's pleasing to God, but it is not His to choose for us. And then you write, you quote C.S. Lewis about some of these issues. I'm going to ask you to read that for us.
Sure. C.S. Lewis wrote, "Isn't God supposed to be good? Isn't He supposed to love us? And does God want us to suffer? What if the answer to that question is yes? See, I'm not sure that God wants us to be particularly happy. I think He wants us to love and to be loved. He wants us to grow up. I suggest to you that it is because God loves us that He gives us the gift of suffering. Or to put it another way, pain is God's megaphone to rouse a deaf world. You see, we are like blocks of stone out of which the sculptor carves the forms of man. The blows of his chisel which hurt us so much are what makes us perfect."
This is a real gift. Your book is a real gift, and the two of you are immensely inspiring to a lot of people. And I know you just go about and you do your business and you do what needs to be done, but you deserve a big thanks from lots of us out here. So again, I want to thank you, Kent and Liz, for telling your story. I urge you to get a hold of this book, folks. It's called Grace Given by Cider House Press. We're going to put some information on how to get a copy, and we thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. I want to thank Frank Schroeder, Kent Gilgis, and my daughter Liz Gilgis for a fine job. Thanks very much.
This program was brought to you by the American Family Association of New York. For further information on A Grace Given by Kent Gilgis, you may contact American Family Association of New York, P.O. Box 203, Port Washington, New York, 11050, telephone 516-944-3544, www.afany.org.
You got me.
At the end of the day,
So how was work?
Brutal. I've got a ton to do tonight.
when the weight of the world is upon you,
I know, guys. Daddy doesn't want to play.
isn't it amazing how the weight of their love can lift you up again? To rediscover the joy of your children, call 1-800-A-FAMILY at Focus on the Family.
This program was brought to you by the American Family Association of New York. For further information on A Grace Given by Kent Gilgis, you may contact American Family Association of New York, P.O. Box 203, Port Washington, New York, 11050, telephone 516-944-3544, www.afany.org. Your comments are welcome, and thanks for being with us.